That was so sweet and generous. I really, really appreciate it. I am really thrilled and honored to be here, and I apologize for just coming in. I was at a quarterly board meeting this morning. It started at 8 a.m. We all know how those are. And it was, so if I feel a little, I look a little beleaguered, send me some loving energy. So, yes, but I am really thrilled and honored to be here. As Pat said, and as others have said, this is such an important gathering for the industry and the field. And I really am grateful to Philanthropy New York and the Better Business Bureau for bringing us together year after year. And the 7th year of this gathering, where we get to really share honestly and talk about the pressing issues of the day, it's an absolute blessing. So I want to give them a round of applause. Thank you for your leadership and your vision. Better Business Bureau and Philanthropy New York, Claire and all the wonderful people who've worked on this. In preparing for today, I actually looked back to see the original letter of invitation to make sure that I was going to be on point, on target. And what I noticed was that the original letter of invitation to speak was early October, before Sandy even hit. And it was even before there was a hint of Sandy, not even before it hit, before there was a hint of Sandy. And the theme originally was about developing nonprofit capacity and resilience in order to manage effectively. Then Sandy hit. And then the theme was a little bit adjusted to Resilient New York, how nonprofit leaders are managing the unexpected. I don't know about you, but I come from the faith-based organization, and when I thought about the foresight, I mean, these women are brilliant, it made me think, that there was probably a little bit of a divine inspiration in that brings us all here. And in preparing for today, as I went to dictionary.com, I love dictionary.com. It's the nerd in me. I'm always looking, I want to see, how do they define it? I looked up the word resilient, and I heard that one of the panelists earlier talked about the definition. I have spies who are taking notes and sending me emails. But I want to just review it again this afternoon. The first definition is springing back, rebounding. The second is returning to original from after being bent, compressed, stretched. The third is recovering readily from illness, depression, adversity, or the like, buoyant. And again, how could they have known how much we needed to hear about rebounding and recovery at such a time as this? We were certainly rebounding in a sense and recovering from a recession that we had been in the throes of for several years. But Sandy really packed a wallop that really put us flat on our backs as a city. And I think it's really important to acknowledge and appreciate that we had never really experienced anything quite like Sandy. Even in the United Way's experience, when of New York City, we're talking about disasters, people always go back to certainly 9/11 and what happened there. This was so different, this natural disaster. We as a city had never really experienced the onslaught in such a broad way of a natural disaster like this. So we didn't really have a reference point. There was no real concept of it. We have reference points for recessions. We've been through several depressions. So you can often go back to your toolbox and say, well, what did they do in the 30s? What did they do in the 70s when New York City was on a fiscal collapse? And pull some things out to help us guide our way forward. But this was a little different because it was such a shock to the system in such a different way. What came to mind to me about the impact of Sandy was almost like you're being diagnosed with this disease that was completely unanticipated. Or you're crossing the street and then out of nowhere, you get crushed. The car hits you and your bones are broken and you're bleeding. And it is such an unbelievable shock to the system. So it is certainly appropriate to ask, how are we managing? This was hard, and it continues to be hard. How are we making it through? So I'm going to offer a couple of thoughts and suggestions on perhaps how we should be managing. the unexpected, and then certainly open it up for questions. But the first thing that might be on your mind is, well, who is she? How does she know? Who is she to be speaking to us about resilience and managing the unexpected? What does she know? Well, I'm here to tell you, my very first official day as the president and CEO of the United Way of New York City was the day the hurricane made landfall. I certainly did not plan it that way. You know how you are when you get the new post, you have a beautiful 100-day plan. I was going to do this mission work, strategy. I was going to meet every single person on the board and the staff. And it was just fantastic. Sandy was not on my 100-day plan, not even a little bit. The first day, we knew it was coming. The office was actually closed, as many offices were. They encouraged everybody to stay home. The second day, we had no power for a week. And it was on that day and the immediate day following that we got two very important phone calls. Now, we're all working from home across the city and the outer boroughs. And I got one call from the head of United Way Worldwide, who said, welcome. It's so great to have you. And we just want to know if United Way of New York City would be willing to lead the raising of a fund for relief and recovery efforts for the United Ways that have been impacted. Not knowing any better, I said, sure, of course, absolutely. We're going to respond, we're going to figure it out. And little did I know, I really honestly thought that she was talking about like New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. I really did. She was not. So we get on this conference call, and there are literally 70 people on this call, people bleeping in from United Ways across the country. And I go, uh-oh, what's going on here? And she says, you know, we're so proud and happy that Sheena Wright, the new CEO of United Way of New York City, has agreed to raise a fund for the region. And I was like, yes, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And it was like, no, there are 11 states that have been impacted by the storm, and the District of Columbia. So that is what your work will be. And I think that's when the staff started looking at me cross-eyed. My team were like, oh no, what has she gotten us into? And I do think they called me Hurricane Sheena behind my back. I do. The second call that we received was from the mayor's office. They convened 6 or 7 of the largest nonprofits in the city, and they said, we need to divide and conquer, block and tackle. We're going to assign you different neighborhoods. Go do what needs doing. We don't know what that is yet, but we're deploying, FEMA, the National Guard, Red Cross is there. Figure it out, and United Way of New York City, we give you Coney Island. Okay. So in that moment of that crisis, we had to figure it out, right? We had to be resilient and responsive with no power, offices completely closed for a week, but we had to develop plans and strategies to do it. And I'm very, very, very proud and pleased to say that we were very successful in our efforts. In just a month or two, we raised nearly $12 million for the impacted areas. We mobilized nearly 3,000 volunteers that canvassed public housing projects that connected to the Red Cross in their efforts. We helped mobilize and manage some of the distribution centers, all on Coney Island. And we were also able to award infrastructure grants to nonprofits that are on the front lines, will continue to be on the front lines to help them rebuild and get their infrastructure back. We also hosted some clinics for the nonprofit community to really help them with the fundraising challenges in post-disaster standing and offer other technical assistance to all the institutions that we support. So, whew, right? I'm not enough. I feel like I should be done. But that whole experience of really being thrown into this whole unexpected world and the response to it, I think I am qualified to speak a little bit about what lessons I learned, certainly as a leader, walking in literally to the eye of this storm that was so unexpected. And there are really 3 things. One is to be a learner, to always make sure that you're open to learning from the experience, from the challenge, from the devastation. It's like that illness or accident. you have to ask yourself some critical questions. In some instances, you want to know, well, how did I get here? What do I need to do differently? Did I not eat enough fiber? Should I have looked both ways when crossing the street? And really reflect on that. How are you here? So it's not so much that there was any control over a natural disaster, but you do have, and you did have, some control about what position you were in when the disaster hit. So we got to be really honest and reflective about that. And then obviously, we've all heard many times, look for the opportunity in the crisis. And to me, that really means just being very clear about the lessons. What can you learn from this adversity? And I had to think about what I learned as the new leader of the United Way of New York City about being plunged into this challenge and certainly being called upon in these two significant ways. It helped me crystallize very clearly the value proposition and the role of the United Way of New York City in New York. I have to say, when I got the job, people, Sheena, congratulations, that's so great. What does the United Way of New York City do again? Now, come on, now, people have asked, and that was a common refrain. And this gave me a moment to really appreciate our value proposition and what makes us unique. United Way of New York City is a powerful convener. We have a very unique and distinct relationship with nonprofits on the front lines, with government, with the corporate sector. We're in over 80 of the biggest companies in the country through our workplace campaigns and our strong corporate partnerships, and also our connections to individuals. Through our brand, United Way, we were able to mobilize 3,000 volunteers in 24 hours. We had about 8,000 people signed up because we made the call. And that power of convening and that being embedded across in all of the stakeholders that really matter in solving the problems of New York City allows us to mobilize people in a very significant way to solve the urgent problems of the day. And because we partner with frontline nonprofits who are on the front lines day in and day out, it's not just as a funding organization, but in that technical assistance, helping with program design and development, and we have this research capability, we're able to take those learnings and influence policy. So one of the other things we were invited to do, I was invited to serve on the governor's commission on rebuilding and resiliency in the face of this. And we're able to bring direct, on-the-ground, frontline experiences from our sector to say, this is what the policy should be going forward. That's powerful. Another thing that was very powerful that I was able to really appreciate in the challenge is that we belong to a national and international network of organizations serving communities across the world with the same goal. So I got such encouragement from Florida, who experiences hurricanes all the time, from the Columbine United Ways, from people in New Orleans who had dealt with Katrina, and Houston who had dealt with Katrina as well in a different way. But what really hit me is when we had a contingent from Japan come. They said, oh, we do this every year. We've got a tsunami, a hurricane, a tornado. Every single year they have a major natural, could you imagine? But what they had to share in terms of how we should think about being organized as a city, as communities, as the United Way in response to this, because there will be more, was unbelievable. And to be able to take that back, it was a true blessing. And so we were able to bring all of that to bear, and really proud and pleased about that. But then you also, quantify your strengths, but you also got to do the other list too. Where are your challenges? Where did you fall short? And that's that question, what could I have done differently to be prepared for being in this space where we have this crisis and this challenge? And so part of the question was, how come people are not that clear about what we do and how we do it? What do we need to do better and differently about our communication strategy? We need to work on that. One of the other things I know many of us will ask the question, I've asked the question about resources and our financial strength. And coming from the board meeting this morning, where it's so easy to say, well, our revenues declined because people are giving money to Sandy, or our revenues declined because there's a recession, and that's all true. But we also have to do a real honest assessment. Are we being innovative enough? What is the impact that we're really having so that investors are making the decision to invest in our institutions? And being very, very honest with the responses so that we're not hiding behind those external things that are not within our control. Use this as an opportunity to dig deep and to be honest and to be clear so that we can be better. And then the second thing I would say is that we really have to, the other thing I want to say about the other side of the ledger, and I know it was talked about a little bit in some of the earlier panels, as an industry, being very clear and honest with ourselves about what went well and our strength and our value, and trumpeting it, but also being very, very clear and honest about where we fell down. I know there was a little bit of conversation earlier today. Lauren Miller, who heads our Strengthening Nonprofits practice, was sending me notes. There were lots of questions about, does the philanthropic community collaborate? I'm new to this side of the aisle. I don't think we do a good job, and we have to be very clear and honest about that. And we have to do better. We have to do a better job of that, of connecting the dots, being very deliberate about leveraging each other's strengths and resources and assets. It doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the system, and we have to do a better job at that. We have to work more collectively. So it's easy, and I think someone said this earlier as well, it's easy to kind of remain in your stuff and in your silo when things are just chugging along. But when that disaster hits, it kind of rips the covers off, and it forces us to really do that honest reflection. The second thing we need to do, in addition to learning and being honest and reflecting, is that we have to develop a plan. A very, very clear plan. What do I need to do differently? Now that I have this knowledge of our strengths, of our weaknesses, what specifically do we need to do differently as we move forward? Good leaders are not only good learners, but they're good planners. So part of the next leg of the work for the United Way of New York City is to take all the lessons and to develop very clear, concrete strategies to address the challenges and to build on the strengths. And that's what we need to do individually in our own organizations and collectively as a field. And it's so, so important. And for us, that means we're going to really move boldly with regard to our program to policy work. We're going to really take what we've learned about our funding model, and maybe it needs to be adjusted. We're going to adapt to the changing times. We are going to develop a plan and a strategy to do it. And last but not least, we all know we've developed lots of plans, lots of strategies, but do we do it? We have to do it. We learn, we plan, and we act. So out of this, we have to take the lessons, develop the strategies, and do it. And don't do it until it gets too hard to do. We have to be very disciplined in pushing through to get to the solutions that we need. We can't slide back when things are, getting a little bit easier. We really, really, really have to stay the course. I was reading something a few weeks ago that really kind of hit me. And it was a question about, as a nonprofit, are you focused on survival? Are you focused on success? Or are you focused on significance? Resilience is a little bit limiting because it says that you want to go back to where you were. And maybe that's just about surviving and existing from day to day. We don't want that. Success, I think one of the kind of push and pulls and this lack of collaboration and coordination is people want to be out front and take credit and be the best. I've read some vision statements. So we were looking at our vision statement, the United Way, and some vision statements of some organizations that said, we want to be the best in class. Our vision is that we are the go-to. I just thought that was interesting. I thought our vision should be about, we don't want, poverty. We want, all of our children educated. That's our aspiration. But in some instances, we have to be honest. Is our aspiration to be successful, to be recognized as the best? Or is it to be significant? Is it to have the most impact that we can possibly have with the resources that we have, with the skills that we have for the challenges that we face? And I certainly want to suggest that we leave here today with a commitment to be significant. And I want to just say a little bit about why that's so important. My personal story is one where I appreciate so much the work of the United Way and every single nonprofit that works to provide opportunities and take barriers down for low-income people. Some of you know, many of you know, that I am the daughter of a teenage parent. She had her first child at 15 and me at 17. We grew up in the South Bronx in a school district at the time where every single school was bad. It just was. Every single school in the neighborhood, excuse me, was not good. And we went to these schools because that's all there was. And my mother was very resourceful, very resilient, and she made sure that she got us out of that school system. We went up to a school in the North Bronx. She lied about the address. You know how that has to happen. And so we can get a better education and have more opportunities. She also got the income supports that she needed to continue her education, earning several master's degrees and becoming a very, very highly regarded national and international professional in the nonprofit space. And now my mother, for the first time in her life, actually works for corporate America. I loved watching her in that space. She's a superstar. But she created the runway for her daughters and her children and really paving the way for us. And she was able to do it with the help and the assistance and the support of certainly individuals and certainly the nonprofit community. So I appreciate that all of that work that we do every day is so that little girls named Sheena, and there are a bunch of them now in the South Bronx, it's a popular name, can have the opportunity to fully realize their dreams and goals and reach their full potential. Because of the organizations that worked hard to eradicate barriers and provide opportunities for me and my family, I was able to go to high school at the age of 12. Columbia College at the age of 16, graduate from Columbia Law School at the top of my class, and worked for 10 years in some of the most prestigious law firms in the country. And so not only enduring benefit to myself, but I think the contributions that the Sheenas make to the city of New York and the country and the world are significant for all of us, and everyone benefits. So there's a lot at stake when we're not getting it right. There's a lot at stake when we're getting in our own way, when we're being less than efficient or less than effective. People are suffering as a result of it. People are suffering anyway, but they're suffering more when we're not getting it right. So we've got to use this opportunity this experience as an opportunity to be so much better, because so much depends on it. The last thing I will say, and I'll end with this, one of my very, very best friends in the entire world is a big sports fan, and he's always giving me these sports analogies. I grew up in a house with my mother and my grandmother, and me and my sister. We were watching the Hallmark Channel, I will admit. But I'm learning. But this is a story about someone we all know and can relate to, Muhammad Ali, absolute champion. And the story is about a classic, famous fight with Joe Frazier. Now, I'm not going to get all the details just right, but you're going to follow me. And Joe Frazier, obviously was a formidable fighter, one of the best of his time, as was Muhammad Ali. And Joe Frazier was a force to be reckoned with. And in this fight, Joe Frazier hits Muhammad Ali with a left hook that, just knocked him clear across the ring, knocked him out flat on his back. And that was one of Joe Frazier's signature moves, apparently. When he hit a fighter with this punch, they were done. They were laying there saying, I do not want to get back up because he might hit me again. But this, it was just such a wallop. So I don't know how he did it, but he snuck up on Muhammad Ali. He delivered his punch. He knocked him out flat on his back, and everybody, Muhammad Ali got up in 3 seconds. 3 seconds. They started counting, he was up on his feet and went on to win the fight. Later on, they asked Ali, what were you thinking when you were down there? I mean, we all saw how hard you got hit. I mean, it just rippled through your body. I mean, you just looked like you were done. What were you thinking? And you know what he said? He said, what am I doing down here? He said, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm Muhammad Ali. I'm a champion. And it was that acknowledgement and appreciation of who he was that he summoned the will to get up, as painful as it was, as crushed as he was, as hurt as he was, he summoned the will to get up. So we are the nonprofit sector. We represent $1.1 trillion in annual economic spending. We are the third largest portion of the economy after wholesale and retail trades. We represent 16% of the employment in New York City. We are on the front line every single day. We know what hangs in the balance for us to get it right. So no matter how hard we've been hit, how much pain we're in right now, we are the champions for the people that we serve. We don't belong on the ground, and New York City cannot get back on its feet without us. So we have the will. We have to have the will. We are resilient, and we will get up. And New York will get back on its feet after this storm. Thank you.